Welcome to a presentation primarily for autism families about the results of a new research study that we've just published on treating gastrointestinal disorders in children with autism using a new treatment approach called microbiota transplant therapy. My name is James Adams, and with me is Rosie Crouch-Malnick-Brown, and you see a picture of our other collaborator, Daewoo Kang.
I want to give you a little bit of background of why the gut microbiota is important. Gut microbiota can break down plant polysaccharides. Actually, that's what they do. They promote GI motility, they produce vitamins, and they compete against pathogens. These are what we call the beneficial bacteria, which are usually in our guts. But if we have an imbalance between beneficial bacteria and bacteria that are not so beneficial, we end up with GI problems. We can also have bacteria that produce toxins that disrupt the immune system and that compete against commensal or beneficial bacteria. In our previous studies, previous study that we published in 2013, we showed how most humans have about 1,000 different types of bacteria in their guts, and higher diversity is believed to be healthier. This has been proven for many other disorders like obesity, for example, and a few others. In our study, we showed that children with ASD have about 25% less types of bacteria than neurotypical children. We also showed that beneficial bacteria were missing, and specifically we found a microbe called Prevotella, which is associated with healthy fiber and fiber-rich diets, missing in children in the spectrum. Here I'm showing the scientific data that proves what I just mentioned, which is Chow estimate is an estimate for the types and numbers of bacteria found in the gut. And you can see in blue neurotypical children and in red children in the spectrum how we have higher diversity in all the estimates that we did, both for neurotypical over children in the spectrum. And also with a phylogenetic index, which is PD index, we can see the same results where our neurotypical children have higher diversity than our children in the spectrum. You can also see in this graph, we have in red the children in the autism spectrum, and in blue, again, the neurotypical children. And here I'm showing the abundance of these microorganisms called Prevotella on a heat map. And you can see that they are present in the children, in the neurotypical children, and it's evident that they're absent in our children in the spectrum. This is Prevotella, a beneficial microbe associated with healthy diets and diets especially with a lot of fiber.
Okay, so based on that research, we applied to the FDA to do an investigational new drug trial of microbiota transfer protocol related to what some people would call fecal transplant. And so basically our treatment protocol involved first 2 weeks of oral vancomycin to wipe out bad bacteria, and then 1 day of fasting and a bowel cleanse, just like you'd get for a colonoscopy, to remove as much bacteria from the gut as possible, and then giving a high dose of these microbiota donated from very healthy human donors. And this is like getting a probiotic, but from all the species that are normally in a healthy person's gut. And we gave them to some children orally, to some children rectally, and for 2 days. And then we continued a low-dose microbiota therapy orally for 7 to 8 weeks. And we also gave them Prilosec, which is a medication to reduce the stomach acid, so more of the bacteria they received would pass through the stomach safely and get into the intestines and grow. And so our study involved 18 children with autism, ages 7 to 16 years. These children all had moderate to severe GI problems, most with constipation, sometimes alternating between constipation and diarrhea, and a few children who had only diarrhea. We excluded some of the very low-functioning children who did not have enough ability to understand the study. And we also looked at all these children, and they all followed the entire study and completed the entire study with no dropouts. So what we did is showing a plot now of their GI symptoms using a formal scale, the GSRS, where a 1 means absolutely no symptoms, going up to a 7 meaning very severe symptoms. And we're plotting it versus time. So the first 2 weeks, you see that the GI symptoms begin to reduce over time, and then they go from the vancomycin. There's some reduction in the mean value, so that bar shows the mean value of the GSRS. And then, as we began the FMT therapy, then the levels began dropping lower and lower down to very low levels, so that by the end of the treatment, there was an 82% reduction in GI symptoms. And then we followed them for another 8 weeks after treatment, and we're very pleased to see that after stopping treatment, those GI benefits generally remained. There were 2 children who did not respond, and their dots are shown in black, but 16 of the 18 children did have a good response in terms of GI symptoms. And then we also looked at their autism symptoms using a simple Parent Global Impression Scale. So on the left-hand side is the scale where 0 means no change, going up to slightly better, better, or much better, or going down if they got worse. But generally the children did well. So they all started out at 0, and then they began the vancomycin, and a few children had some temporary adverse hyperactivity or irritability, but then they began improving slowly and steadily during the study. So by week 10, the children on average were rated by the parents as better, a few much better, a few just slightly better. And then 8 weeks after treatment was stopped, they were still doing very well. And so then we also had our autism evaluator, a professional evaluator, evaluate the children at the beginning of the study and at the end of treatment, and we found about a 23% improvement in autism symptoms. And after 8 weeks, again, 8 weeks after treatment stopped, those benefits still seem to remain. Now this is an open label study, so there's some placebo effect, but we think some of this benefit is real. Also, when we looked at other symptoms using the aberrant behavior checklist, we found a substantial reduction in hyperactivity, irritability, lethargy, and abnormal speech. So the treatment seemed to be helping in many different ways, and those benefits generally remained even 8 weeks after the treatment stopped.
On the microbiome side, we saw that the diversity, which was initially lower again in the children in the ASD spectrum, as we had seen before, normalized after treatment and was closer in diversity to our neurotypical children, and it was also closer to the donors. The microbiome became more similar to that of the healthy donors and remained stable even 8 weeks after treatment stopped. And surprisingly also, this microorganism Prevotella, which I mentioned before, its levels increased over 200 times after the treatment. And here I'm showing again a little bit of the scientific evidence, at least for the phylogenetic increase in diversity. And you can see on the green line is the average diversity for the neurotypical children. And here you can see the median diversity for our participants at week 0. And after treatment, this median diversity increases and increases enough to be really close to the diversity of neurotypical children. It also increases to be similar or even higher than our donors that supply the material.
So to summarize, children with autism had different gut bacterial composition, and including especially a lack of many hundreds of beneficial bacteria. And so our treatment approach, the microbiota transplant therapy, seems like a promising method to change gut bacteria diversity, to implant it in the gut, and it seems to have a substantial effect on improving GI symptoms and some improvement in autism symptoms. Now this is an open label study, so there was no placebo control in this. The purpose of the study was to demonstrate safety and efficacy, and generally we did find it was safe and seems to be effective, but now we need to do more research, including a much larger study that's placebo controlled in order to verify that in fact these results with MTT are better than placebo. So in future, we're now planning a phase 2 study, which means a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study at 2 sites as a next step towards winning FDA approval. We have to do a phase 2 study and then a least of one phase 3 study to try to win FDA approval. This could take several years and many millions of dollars. So to find out more information or to sign up for emails about future studies, you can just go to our websites that are listed here. I want to thank our collaborators, Greg Caparasso and Matthew Sullivan, who are co-PIs in this study, and also many of our other collaborators. It took a great team to complete this study successfully. And we also want to thank the many autism families and also the healthy donors who participated. We also want to thank the Arizona Board of Regents for providing funding for the study, as well as the ZUOC for Autism Research provided little funding, and then the University of Minnesota and Cristovo for supplying the microbiota for this study from healthy donors. And thanks to Walgreens for compounding the vancomycin that we used for the study.